Welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Frank Cipollas. Before we start, we acknowledge the tragic events in Paris Friday and send out our prayers to the families on behalf of all of those who were killed or injured. We will be discussing the attacks in Paris later in the show, but now to more mundane matters closer to home, and politics tops the list this week. The Republican presidential nominees battling in the latest debate over how they would handle the economy. To give us an idea of who won, who lost, and whether the economic and tax proposals proposed by the candidates add up is David Goodman, who is from Represent Us. Also joining us is Bill Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, and Lew Weiss, who is a national and international businessman, CEO of All Metals and Forge in New Jersey, and co-host of Manufacturing Talk Radio. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's discuss the debate. I'm sure some of you, or all of you, saw some of it or all of it. I got the impression watching this debate that maybe the numbers don't add up. Would I be correct?
What do you mean? What do you mean by the numbers? The numbers in the budget or the numbers in the polls?
You know, we have a proposal by Ben Carson that it's 10%. Everybody should pay 10%. But, you know, it doesn't really add up to what it is we need to run a government. We'll start with you, Lew.
No question about it. I don't think any of them really know the numbers and how they even get to the numbers. If, in fact, perhaps they addressed some real issues regarding government waste, storage of old Second World War equipment, and maybe we should get rid of those things so that we can then really have numbers as to what's going on in our economy before you can come up with a number and say, let's go with a 10% flat tax. I mean, maybe the real number is 8%, maybe it's 15%. But just
so what you're saying is that we should do an inventory of what we have. Now, is this just political pandering? It sounds like a lot of it is.
Well, I think what you have to wonder about is really what the candidates are all about here. You know, the easiest answer to give is that all the candidates are always against waste, fraud, and abuse. Mm-hmm. And if only we solve those problems, all the other things would go away.
And we hear that every election cycle.
What I think you have to recognize, though, is that it's not just how does it add up, but also who should it come from? And I think that's one of the central questions here about the issue about fairness, as well as how will an economy thrive. Republicans, even within their own party, have different perspectives about that. And I think you have to solve that question first, and then to decide what things you can afford and what things you can't, and how you generate that money.
I don't think, Frank, you can deal seriously with tax issues in soundbite formats. Mm-hmm. I mean, the flat tax issue has been around since Steve Forbes first introduced it. The notion of tithing, which is Ben Carson's point of view, is really suspect.
That's been around for centuries.
Absolutely. You know, the thing that I think we ought to keep in mind is I think we're witnessing the self-destruction of the Republicans as a national party. I mean, what they're doing, of course, is playing to a conservative base, but in so doing, they are so seriously marginalizing themselves in terms of the general electorate that I think if I had to make a prediction a year out, they're going to be swamped by whomever the Democrats nominate if they continue down this road.
Now, Lew, we talk about complex issues in the economy. We're going to discuss the economy in just a bit. It seems to me that the average American really can't grasp, because they're busy. They're going to 2 or 3 jobs, maybe they're dropping the kids off. That to have a discussion like this, you really need an extended period of time and not just 60 seconds with a 30-second rebuttal. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I've taken on a second role in my life in building a internet radio show, and we've been listening to people all over the country, advisors, accountants, politicians, and so on. And we have learned so much about the economy, what the people don't know, and they know enough that they don't want to take up the vote. We had a very poor turnout in November, and I agree with the comment that you made about the Republicans. They tend to always be looking to shoot themselves in the foot, and they haven't learned how not to do that.
I think
before we go on, we have to mention his yellow jacket. It's the yellow Manufacturing Talk Radio jacket. This is not your going out to dinner jacket, is it?
No, but I am tonight, and my granddaughters, I think, are going to freak out
when they see the yellow. Okay, you had something.
One of the things I think we have to keep in mind is, number one, primary elections are nothing like general elections. candidates tend to not behave in primaries like they behave in general elections. If you look back 4 years ago, Mitt Romney tried to go as far right as he possibly could to make sure that he won the nomination. That's why he talked about
that's the problem.
excess rates.
Whether you go far left or far right, you can come back to the middle at some point.
The problem, though, is that the American public doesn't really demand these guys to really defend their positions, number one. And number two, we have this mistaken belief that by watching the debates, you're going to be informed. What the debates do is it simply allows for those who already support candidates to go rah-rah for their guys. And second of all, on a much lower level, it shows some differences or issues that may be out there. But it's really the responsibility of the media to go back and not only fact check, but do interviews with these people and then go into depth, to have full articles about Rubio's tax policy versus Bush's tax policy.
Well, you're discussing the attention span of the average American / average American voter, and it doesn't go beyond that night, probably.
It doesn't, and the reality is that most people don't care that much about these debates. Most people are not watching them. What happens is, if you notice the channels that these stations are on, tonight's debate for the Democrats is going to be on a major network. But many of the other debates are on smaller cable networks, which people don't even have access to.
But they're getting great ratings, and we've gone almost 5 minutes without talking about Donald Trump. But you're championing at the bit here. You have something to say. What?
I was going to bring him up in a moment.
Well, I'm simply going to say that, I mean, Bill's points are well taken, but when he mentions Mitt Romney, I think Mitt Romney's success with Hispanic votes in 2012 is going to look stellar compared to what the Republicans can probably expect in 2016. No matter what attention is being paid to the primary, to the debates right now, the American public is deeply aware of what's being said in terms of those key issues. Look, demography is destiny. The U.S. is changing dramatically in terms of the ethnic nature of this population, and the Republican Party is appealing to a white male, angry white male, high school educated demographic, which is declining in numbers.
But that's only part of the people on the stage. I think that it's a little bit unfair to put, for example, Kasich in the same camp with Donald Trump. There's pretty significant differences, and even with Marco Rubio was with a Gang of 8, and he got lambasted for taking that position. So not all the Republicans are monolithic, and I think we have to.
I'm not even sure.
We've had fun here so far. Yeah. Let's listen to them and have some more fun if we can, because it's always good to watch it. We have a couple of clips here, I believe, of Ben Carson and also Donald Trump, and they're discussing various topics. And this is from the debate that happened just this week.
Make more money than philosophers. We need more welders and less philosophers.
But taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. People have to go out, they have to work really hard, and they have to get into that upper stratum. But we cannot do this if we are going to compete with the rest of the world. We just can't do it.
As far as the minimum wage is concerned, people need to be educated on the minimum wage. Every time we raise the minimum wage, the number of jobless people increases.
Welders make more money than philosophers.
They discussed the minimum wage, and all of them said you can't raise it. You're a businessman, Lew. Not necessarily retail business, but you're a business. I've heard this argument again and again. As soon as you raise the minimum wage or raise wages in general, you have to cut back somewhere. Doesn't that generate business when you?
It does, and it also doesn't mean that what he said was that more people go unemployed. That's totally untrue. When they raise the minimum wage, more people are employed. The retailers, of course, are hard struck. Manufacturing is not so hard struck because most of the people in there are either administrative or skilled labor. So they're not in that under $10 an hour world.
But Marco Rubio made a point where we need more welders, or for that matter, plumbers and electricians, and fewer philosophers.
But part of that is actually, if you go back historically in the United States, that's kind of an attack on the intellectual class in America.
Right.
That what happened was, the early founders of our country said in South Carolina, don't bring any lawyers here. We don't want them. We want farmers, because the lawyers were going to stir up trouble. And I think that's part of the method that he had when he made that statement, because the philosopher is going to take the longer perspective. It's going to raise political issues, and a lot of these candidates don't really want to have that. They want to have people that are going to march and go to work and pay taxes, and that's it.
Well, we need, it's unfortunate that Rubio said that, although I agree it's a political ploy. We need more welders, but we also need more philosophers. And frankly, we need more attention on the educational standards that the Chinese and the Indians and our European competitors are pursuing, rather than to pit one group, as you say, an intellectual class against a vocational class. So it's an old argument. It's pretty tired. We're just seeing a lot of reheated Republican rhetoric. And as to Bill's point about the polyglot nature of the field there, that's a sharp contrast to what we're seeing in the Democratic race, which essentially is now a binary contest between two people.
Well, are there, and this is leading into my next question,
Yeah.
are there just too many Republican candidates to make heads or tails out of this, and each one is trying to stake a claim to a specific topic or area in which they could stand out? And in doing so, sometimes it's a radical position.
Exactly. There's no I've said this before. I said in an earlier show that what we call the Republican Party, I call the Koch Party. It's Charles and David Koch. It's Paul Singer, a billionaire hedge fund. It's Roger Ailes. It's Fox News. It's Rush Limbaugh. It's a radical right position, and the Republican Party is just a framework into which these candidates.
You teach political science. Have you ever seen this?
I think the reality is that if you look back just 4 years ago, the Republican field was every bit as big. Okay, they had the Herman Cains, the Bachmans, they had Newt Gingrich, they had a whole cast of characters.
And they haven't learned.
Okay, well, the point is that that's what primaries are about. It's to winnow them down.
Yeah, but who emerges in this
well, the
field
issue is, I think, that many people that are within the Republican camp view the fact that probably Trump and Carson are not going to last. So a lot of the other candidates are waiting basically for these guys to diminish themselves, and then they're going to fill in those lanes. That's
Bill,
where
that may be wishful thinking. I was on this show last summer, and the point was made that
he was a summer flame.
That Trump and Carson at that point hadn't risen, so Trump was the focus. That he was summer theater, and by the time we got into the fall, he would disappear. Well, here we are. We are weeks away from the end of the calendar year. We're less than 90 days from the Iowa caucuses and following. I'm saying the Republicans, the Republican establishment is going bonkers over what's happening in terms of the two lead candidates, because no matter what they may feel about Kasich or Bush or any of the other so-called establishment candidates, these guys can't penetrate in terms of numbers.
Well, Lou, what do you think? Go ahead.
Here's the problem with what we're talking about here. Donald Trump, who is a clown, and it's pure folly and entertainment. And I did enjoy watching him all the time. I wouldn't vote for him for president of the United States. But the point is that he's appealing to the angry American. He's talking to the person who cannot have a voice. He has their voice, and that's why he is getting the kind of momentum that he does. And perhaps some of the wiser and more politically oriented candidates might take a lesson or two from him. Maybe he ought to write another book, How to Grow a Politician.
He's also building a field operation in Iowa. People think that this guy is just on
your contention is he's in here for the long haul. It might very well win the
I think you have to remember that 4 years ago, Trump was making noises about being a candidate. And I remember that he went to the National Press Club at the banquet where Barack Obama was speaking, and Barack Obama basically undressed him, okay, with comments. And he went away very quickly. The question is, so far, there hasn't been any of the major candidates that's really tried to go head-to-head with Donald Trump, either because they're afraid that he's going to say something that's going to destroy their candidacy, or because there may be some unholy alliance that they may like to have in the future.
All right, very good point. We want to touch on immigration as well, which came up in the debate. Donald Trump harkened back to Operation Wetback, which President Eisenhower launched in the mid-1950s, I believe, where they tried to round up some of the...
And isn't that a classic example? Eisenhower was the Ozzie and Harriet president of the 1950s. He was the last great white father. He exactly fits my point that the Republican Party today is appealing to a base that is declining.
At a time that doesn't exist anymore.
And that's nostalgic for a past that we may have all lived through and may regret that is no longer here. But the reality is, it's not coming back.
See, the other thing, too, is that with Trump's immigration policy, unlike many of the others, he's talking about having deportation troops go around, arrest people, and then take them across the border.
Lou, is that feasible?
No, it's not feasible, and it sounds a little bit like Nazi Germany, not to that extreme, but it's not doable. You can't just pick up 11 million people and say...
Which is what Jeb Bush's argument is. They're all going to be entitled to due process. The courts are never going to be able to handle it.
You know, I'm waiting for somebody in the media. Have you noticed how Donald Trump juts his jaw out?
Yes.
I'm waiting for the comparison with Benito Mussolini.
Where he sort of looks down at people.
Because
the body language says
the
I'm
body
looking
language
down at
is
you.
incredible.
Yeah.
So,
but you know, he connects in some way because I think he keeps it really simple. I'm going to fix this. We're going to be great. I'm going to take care of that. Mexico's going to pay for the... And I think the average American who's so busy...
Yeah, but you have to realize that this is not the average American. This is the average American in the Republican primary that's really taking this in.
But at some point they have to go to the center. We said that at the beginning.
But what I'm saying is that in these primary states, what you have is just a small microcosm that all the candidates are trying to compete within. And I think you have to realize that someone like Kasich is this year's go-round of John Huntsman. He's much more appealing to the independents and the Democrats, but he's never going to have a chance to actually run.
He might have a chance to win if he were the nominee based on the fact that he's not so far right.
I'll make a gentleman's wager with you, Bill. I think the damage is done. I think you believe that when they come out of this bubble called the primary, that somehow they're going to expand and be able to play on the amnesia of the American public. And those are real factors, but I'm going to tell you, it isn't going to happen.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Some of you are sticking around for the next segment. When we come back, the recent gyrations on Wall Street, whether the Fed will raise interest rates next month, and what it all means to your wallet in just a moment.